Next to the Infiniti G35, the Nissan Z is one of those cars that is embedded in our brains because the design was so timeless and so classic. The Nissan Z has been around the car community for many, many, many decades, starting off as the Fairlady Z and then evolving into simply the Z. But in recent days, even with this super amazing redesign and its powerful powertrain, it seems as though that the Nissan Z is not quite selling that well. And while the Nissan Z has shown up for the car community in both brand new and aftermarket, and in any other way, we haven't seemed to be showing up for the Nissan Z. And I wanted to understand why. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. So the Nissan Z in recent days has pretty much been kind of under expectations for many car enthusiasts because we can't quite figure out what exactly happened, because we were all excited for it, we were all clamoring for it, but you don't see any on the road. And in this video, I wanted to kind of give an understanding of why you don't see any on the road and why it is so important that we have all of our institutions in place to be able to afford and buy these cars before they go bye-bye. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. So if you're new to the channel, I tend to give a lot of historical context. And so before I get started, I'm going to give you an idea of where I am with this Nissan Z. Now, the Nissan Z was introduced to us in this new iteration roughly around 2022. It was stylish, it was retro, it was the bee's knees, it made fetch happen.
Fetch. Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
But the Nissan Z, for many cases, is something that we all kind of make fun of, but we all secretly would like to drive at some point or another. Its profile is essentially a very affordable two-seater sports car, and it is a very, very potent twin-turbo powertrain that gets roughly about 400 horsepower and is essentially the retro styling design, kind of in tandem to what we remember from the early 2000s with the Ford Mustang and the Dodge Charger. But the Nissan Z has not really sold that well. Now, I will give some level of context as well that the Nissan Z has always been a low volume seller, selling an average of 8,400 units per year. In the world of SUVs and basically wagons for all intents and purposes, nobody's really looking for the two-seaters anymore, especially because everybody wants the souped up power plant SUVs that, you know, get your kids back and forth to soccer practice. But as time went on, and of course, as we know from Nissan, the Z is one of those cars that kind of got long in the tooth simply because the demand for it was not that high. If you learn nothing else from this video, supply and demand are very critical to the lifespan of a car. If nobody buys it, the manufacturer will not sell it. And many of the automotive journalists, including Motor Trend and Car and Driver, and of course, Nissan Z was really, really, really sexy. And its boxy design made it peculiar, but made it very interestingly cohesive, if that makes any type of sense. Despite all of those accolades, it did not sell. And a lot of us are wondering in the car community why it didn't sell. Well, for context, a lot of times whenever you have a low volume car like this one, it is obviously not going to sell that well, but there's been a few hurdles. Now, to give clarity, Nissan has already iterated and stated on many occasions that they are not getting rid of the Z. One of the biggest hurdles that the Nissan Z has ran into is dealer markup and consumer demand. The Nissan Z from 2005 up until roughly about 2019 was a bit aging in the tooth, and partly because there were a lot of changes in leadership, especially as you heard me talk about this in many occasions. Carlos Ghosn, being the OG that he was, even though he wasn't basically fleeing the country to Lebanon and leaving Mr. Mount, who's currently the CEO of the company, basically to pick up the pieces. Now, Nissan has done an immaculate job of trying to reconfigure Nissan and become less of a value brand and being more of a premier Japanese sports brand. So the Nissan Z, when this iteration was delivered, was pretty much the idea that we had expected the Z to be. The problem is that whenever you have a relatively new, well-hyped up car, dealerships get their hands on it. Now, if you don't know anything about the dealership network is a small business and they can sell their car however they want to. What that means is they can sell it for whatever price they want, and if it is in high demand with low supply, they can overcharge. There's a difference between marking it up and corporate greed. So for a lot of the Zs that have been rolled out, even though they have been slow to build and slow to produce because of the part shortage that they initially ran into, the dealerships have really marked this up. In one instance, there was a $70,000 markup from Washington. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all now, I'm not paying $70,000 for a Nissan, and I'm damn sure not paying $70,000 plus for a Nissan.
I don't like that.
And the entire purpose of this Nissan Z was to be affordable sports performance. And so whenever a dealership marks up a car, it creates a conundrum of problems. The biggest problem that you will oftentimes see is that the car will not sell. There will be no incentives on it. And what happens is that the manufacturer will eventually stop making that car. Now, Nissan has already expressed that they will not stop making the Z, particularly because it's so legendary. But the idea that it could potentially go away if not enough people buy it is simply within our wheelhouse. Now, Nissan has also alleged that there will be an electric Z coming up shortly. And we kind of see some similarities between Nissan Z and the GTR in terms of supply and demand. If you haven't seen that video about the Skyline GTR, go check that video out. I really enjoyed that one, by the way. But the Nissan Z is a product of what happens when dealers understand they got the new Jordans and they about to drop. The next problem next to the part shortage that Nissan ran into was also there was a stop sale with the transmissions. So I recently just discovered that this transmission is a Mercedes transmission apparently, and so this was a carryover transmission from the Nissan Frontier and the Nissan Titan. Because of a locking mechanism defect in the pin for the parking transmission, the car could potentially roll away. When that stop sale happened, there was no initial resolution, and because of the stop sale, that also halted production. And so because of that, it made it that much more difficult for many of us consumers to get our hands on the Nissan Z. In comparison, this is kind of a good thing because the old generation was oversupplied, so that also made it easy for people a lot to clear out that supply, but this new generation is becoming increasingly hard and difficult to see in the wild. The other problem that came from this was that shortly thereafter, in addition to the stop sale and the recall, in addition to the part shortage, there was also a paint shortage. Now, over in Japan, this is where the Nissan Z is built. They ran into the Taguchi plant and it began Taguchi. I hope I'm saying these things right. But pretty much where the Aria and the Nissan Z are both built, both ran into paint shortage problems. Given that a lot of these things are coming from Japan and they take months and months and months in maritime, it is very obvious that whenever some issue comes up with these cars, it can create a huge amount of delays. To be honest though, the Nissan Z is kind of a good problem for us because it gives us a chance to buy other cars that otherwise would not exist. But the ultimate problem with the Nissan Z is simply logistic issues, and it is unfortunate because that is really and truly out of our control. But ultimately, this is going to affect the sales numbers, and because it is affecting the sales numbers, it is going to make a huge problem for us in the car community. Now, why I say all of this is a problem for us is because as the car begins to age and begins to get distributed into the used car market, we will begin to see a lot more markup, and we will also begin to see a lot less of the Nissan Z in our driveways. And this is a prime example of what happens when we are either unable or do not buy a small, low volume sports car that essentially is made for us and gives us everything that we've asked for as the car community. I've seen this in many different iterations, and I've seen this in many different cases where a car will exist today, and if we don't buy it, the car will go by tomorrow. I've done a video explaining that on what happens when a car is no longer bought. When bad dealerships ruin good cars, you should really check that out because it gives a much more in-depth explanation on what happens when we as a car community abandon a particular car because we don't simply want to pay for it. Now, it is my hope that at some point these logistic issues will resolve themselves, but as Nissan tends to go into their electrification route, it is nothing short that they will begin to stop and halt production in certain plants to start making way for new incoming models. And if this vehicle is pretty much in the crossfire of Nissan's business strategy, which they recently released roughly about a week ago, we can anticipate this will indeed cease this generation of the Nissan Z, causing a problem for all of you Nissan Z fans out there. and all of you Nissan Club fans out there. And essentially, this is kind of a lesson to be learned. What happens when we don't buy a car? But leave me a comment below and let me know if you were anticipating or if you've been waitlisted for that, because the Nissan Z is unfortunately a car that we would like to see on the road, but we simply do not. With that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.